Hi there, my name is Ben Loomer, and you're listening to the Bloomer Report. It's a Learn podcast where we talk to teachers from all across the province of Quebec to hear about projects that they've been engaged in leading with their students that make a real difference in their community. This week, we're going to talk to Stephanie Jonker, a teacher with the Eastern Township School Board, about a mask recycling project that they took on in response to too many masks during COVID and seeing the waste that it creates. For those of you that don't know, community service learning is a pedagogical strategy where students address authentic needs in their community, and through this project, they are learning all across the curriculum. And there are lots of resources on the Learn website around how to plan a community service learning project. But in general, there's 5 steps. The first is investigation. What is an authentic need in our community that students can address? The second is planning. What can students do, and the scaffolding that teachers integrate into that. There's the taking action. But importantly, after the project is wrapping up, there's the reflection aspect and then celebration of what has been accomplished. In addition, we're going to hear Stephanie's story of authenticity in what their students did and student voice. So with that, let's get started and hear our conversation. Enjoy. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Yourself?
Very good. Let's talk about an awesome service learning project that you led with your class. But before we get started, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Stephanie Jonker. I'm a teacher at St. Francis Elementary School in Richmond, Quebec. I've been there for 3 years. I'm a Cycle 3 teacher. So the last 2 years I've taught just grade 5, and this year I was teaching a 5-6 split. Before that, I previously taught English as a second language for 2 years in our French school board in the area. But no, really, I love teaching my core subjects of English, math, science, and art to my Cycle 3 students.
Wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit about the community service learning project that you and your students were involved in?
Sure. We did a mask recycling project. And so with the COVID-19 pandemic, when we had this opportunity to have a community learning project, we talked about just some different things that we're facing in our community because of the pandemic. And we decided that the masks lying on the ground were causing a lot of pollution. And so we got in contact with a company who provided boxes that we could put masks into to be recycled. We would ship them back to the company. They would process them into little plastic pellets, sell them to third-party companies to be reused into other objects. So like picnic tables made out of recycled plastic and so on. So our project was really getting those boxes from that company into the community to raise awareness about recycling masks instead of having them, go on the ground or even being placed in garbage.
Oh, that's really great. I have a few questions. Mm-hmm. They include, can you talk a little bit about how you introduced this idea of a community service learning project with your students? The idea that they could do something and contribute to the community?
Yeah, so we started really talking about I think it was mostly with the pandemic and talking about what things we saw in the community, what changes we had seen. And we really started with a big class brainstorming. And I did over a couple of days. To be honest, this is the part I was most worried about, is having a discussion where we could actually narrow it down to something that would really be useful. And I didn't want kids to go through the motions of doing a project that was semi-useful and they don't really see the point of it or something like that. I really wanted to make sure it had a strong basis. And so we started with the class brainstorm with a few different ideas, and we had some different ideas that came out of it. Another one being, writing cards for people who are feeling more isolated because of the pandemic as well. And then one student mentioned, there's a lot of masks. We're seeing a lot of masks in parking lots and public spaces. Wouldn't it be nice if we could, stop the pollution with that? And so we talked about, well, how can we make sure they get into the garbage? And then, well, can we recycle them? Well, they don't go in the recycling bins. And that was how it started. And so the students, of course, they weren't convinced that anything was actually going to come of it. It's a regular project for school. We're doing it because the teacher tells us to. And it was kind of interesting, but I'm not sure they were convinced it was going to go further than that. One step I did take, and I think I would recommend, would be I had students go home and interview their family as well, because I don't live in the community where I teach. I live, 30 minutes in outside of Richmond, and so for me, I wanted, again, feedback from people who are actually in the community and maybe had a little bit of a different perspective than just the students as well. So we narrowed it down. So we talked about mask recycling and writing letters to people in isolation or who are feeling more isolated, maybe even like getting them onto Zoom so they can communicate with their own family more. And I had students go home and ask their family members what they thought of these two ideas and if they had any other suggestions. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It came back. We had some parents were like, yeah, that's a great idea. Others were like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. I thought it was interesting. Of course, that influences the student's perception of it, right? If my parents don't think it's a good idea, then I don't think it's a good idea. But overall, it was pretty well received, and we got some interesting feedback that we talked about as a class. I then contacted our CLC coordinator, Sue Min, and she said, well, I've actually heard of a company in Richmond using mask recycling boxes. And so originally we were referred to TerraCycle. They're the most well-known for that. So with the students, we went online, we looked at what are our different options with TerraCycle boxes, what our budget would be. And so we walked through those steps. We ended up switching for a more local company located in Magog, which is much closer to us. And but the students were really involved in walking through the whole process. That was one thing. It wasn't me working in the background. It was really them directing it. And I was there to provide information and to provide that kind of critical analysis of, is that really a good idea? And why did you pick that? But the students after that, they were in charge of, taking the budget that we had and, well, how many boxes can we get for that amount? Because there's different size boxes, and they're different size prices. Okay, well, I noticed that actually when I go through the steps of ordering the boxes, like there's shipping and there's taxes, like what are these additional costs? And that doesn't fit into my budget anymore. I had students working on which companies in Richmond would be most likely to use a mask recycling box. So we looked at, example, our CLSC. Well, we know that people who work at the CLSC in the medical field, they use masks a lot every day. And we have some students whose parents are nurses. So I said, yeah, my mom has to switch her mask, every half an hour or every patient. As we're just thinking about the number of masks that would be. So like, well, maybe they need a medium-sized box then. So the students were involved in all of that process. They also were involved in the mask drop or the box drop off, the delivery to the companies. They had a little oral presentation to make just to answer any questions, to remind them of what masks could go in the box. And finally, too, they were responsible for a lot of our communications. So all the communications went through my school email, but the students wrote the emails. They edited them together. I did a final edit in most cases just to make sure everything was really clear. But then when we received emails back, questions or requests for additional boxes or anything like that, I brought the emails up on the screen, and the students, we would read them together and think of what an appropriate response would be. So it was a long process. We started, I'd say, end of October. And even now we're collecting the box. We're in the collection phase. We had a significant delay in February, March. The students have been there the whole time. It's been a lot. It's been a year-long process, really. Our school year has been very much, bookended by this project, I would say.
Great. You touched upon it when you kind of told the story of all the things that students did, but I'd love to kind of take a moment and tease apart what students did and what some of the different specific curriculum connections were that you kind of saw as a moment of like, oh yes, this is connected to the curriculum.
Absolutely. And so really the biggest thing that we touched on was the writing and writing for a specific audience. I will say right off the bat that I actually did not take a mark away for report cards regarding this project. I use it really much as a formative assessment. So, for example, when we talked about writing emails to the companies, well, we had to introduce our project. So we had to talk about, what does a professional email look like? There are no emojis. There are no, typing short form, no IDK for I don't know. There's none of that stuff. And so really making sure that students were aware that, your kids, And so one, people are going to think you're cute and like they're going to do your project because isn't that a great idea? But also your kids. So if you're wasting a company's time, like they're out there to make money. They're not going to listen to you if they don't think you have something serious to say. And so I think that was a really good introductory to why we adapt our writing for an audience. We also talked about organizing our ideas and structuring it, having an introduction. Don't just start, do you want a box? Like, you really have to introduce yourself and our project and what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that was the emails were a big part. And I didn't make everyone write an email. We only had 11 companies. I have 24 students in my class. And so I wanted to try a project based on strengths. So students were split into groups of about 4 or 5 students, and each group was responsible for 2 companies. And so within that group, they had to write the emails to the 2 companies. They had to prepare posters for the companies. So that was kind of our media and art part, where having a poster with specific information, making sure that if 2 students are making posters for the CLSC, that the posters aren't saying the same thing, that they're actually giving the CLC different information. So for example, why are we recycling masks would be on one poster. Another poster might be what kinds of masks can go in this box to be recycled. Another poster, if there was a third student, said, where can you find this mask in your building, and who can use it? Is it just for employees? Is it for clients, etc.? So that was brought into like I mentioned, the media and the art components. And the use of space. What does an attractive poster look like? How are you going to make sure people see your poster and understand quickly? If you write a big text on your poster, these people are working. They're not going to take the time to read it. It has to be quick. It has to be easy. It has to be effective. We did that. And then we also talked about the oral communication part. So each group of 4 or 5 students for those 2 companies, they had to designate 1 or 2 students, depending on interest, to go and actually drop off the box and be prepared to give a mini presentation about what the project is, just as a reminder. Of course, these are people who've already received the emails and have already agreed to be on board, but just a little reminder, and especially what to do when the box is full. And that was to contact us through email. So the students were involved in all of that. I had them working on a lot of collaboration skills. So if I had student A who decided to write the email for the group, great. But student B and C had to proofread that email, and they had to go through together and make sure that there was appropriate punctuation in the capital letters and that it looked professional, and also that all the information was actually there, because that's something that we're still developing, right? They know the project, so they assume everyone knows the project, but it's really to make that explicit in writing that was a tricky part. So I would say that those were the main pieces for curriculum-wise that we talked about, especially writing, the speaking. I think those would be the key points there.
I mean, this sounds like such a rich project. And I really like the way that you divided the class up into groups to work with specific companies. I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah. I'll add it too, if you don't mind. I'll add in, there was a small math component in working out the budget. And so if, for example, we were working towards small and medium-sized boxes, and so I had a group of students who were looking at the prices and, well, how much would that cost with taxes and shipping? And again, like they didn't work it out with a pencil and paper. Like they went through the steps and saw that, well, taxes change, but the shipping doesn't. The shipping's a flat rate. Okay, well, what does that mean to have a flat rate? It means no matter how many boxes you order, it's still going to be $13 of shipping, or something like that. But then they had to figure out too, well, if we need 11 boxes, or maybe we need 11 boxes, because at this point, when we were figuring that out, we hadn't had it confirmed that it was actually 11 companies, well, what could we afford? Could we afford 9 small ones and 2 medium ones? What if we needed 3 medium ones? How many small ones could we get then? What if we need 4 mediums? What if we didn't get any mediums and we got all small boxes? What would that mean? And so having that kind of multivariable situation for them to work out, that was interesting to watch as well.
Stephanie, I was wondering, when the students went to visit the companies, did they speak in English or French?
That's a great question. They actually spoke both. It depended on the company and depended on the student, really. So teaching in an English school, a lot of my students are bilingual. Some of them are francophones, but obviously very bilingual. And some of them are very much more so Anglophones, French as a second language, but definitely more comfortable in English. And so this is one thing that I think I could have done a little bit better, is preparing them for the fact that it could be done in French, where we live in a pretty bilingual community. And so most students had the opportunity to present in English, but not all. That there were some where we got to the place. And so I kind of made the introduction. And based on the email exchanges, I had a pretty good idea if it was going to be an English or French discussion. And so I would kind of make the introduction and ask, like, is it okay if the students present in English? And based on that response, it'd be like, so, or like, I can understand, or not really. And after the first time it happened, I prepared students. Like, luckily, the first time it happened, I had a student who was very bilingual and was happy to do it in French as well. But after that, I kind of prepared students on the dry wire. I'm like, could you, if we have to, could you explain our project in French? And there was only one time I had two students. They both were doing the drop off, and they're both like, I don't think I could. And I said, well, I'll be here to help you. And I said, but I think you'll be able to do it in English. But that was something I'd consider more next time too, is that we do live in a very bilingual society. And so English isn't always an option. But most of the time it went over well.
That's so interesting. Just also thinking about ways to extend it or collaborate with the French teacher to prepare them. You are the teacher, this amazing project is happening. Do you have any stories or insights into moments when students were really engaged in learning, or really engaged, I like to call it, as active citizens in their community?
Yeah. And so I would say that first day of looking at the budgets. And so I mixed my groups up twice. The second time is once we had the companies confirmed, and those were the groups of 4 or 5 students, each with 2 companies. That was the second round. The first round, I had students mixed up differently. And I had a group who was responsible for choosing companies in Richmond or in the area that would be interested, good candidates for our project. That group was responsible for that. I had the group working on the budgets for the boxes. That whole idea of, well, if we get 9 of these, can we get 2 of these? If we get 3 of these, how many can we get of that? And how many small boxes? So they had a group working on that. I had another group working on, how can we get the information out there? What would be the best way to raise awareness, and what information do people need to know? So they talked about, putting things on Facebook. What does that mean exactly? And most of my students, they aren't on Facebook. They have other social media accounts. But is Facebook a good way of getting that message across? Again, if I'm controlling the message, just going through our PPO school website, what kind of information would go on the posters? What kind of information would we have to send in the email? So I had groups split up that way. And I just remember kind of taking a step back, and you see kids are actually engaged in meaningful conversation where they're debating with each other, should we give it to, the retirement home or not? Why would that be a better candidate than the Maxi, for example? And so I just took a step back, and I'm just watching them having these debates all on their own, and like everybody's involved. I remember specifically this one little girl who's very quiet, doesn't speak a whole lot in class, but she was with one of the groups, and she was going back and forth between the group that was deciding which companies needed boxes and the group deciding how many boxes we can get. And basically she was asking questions of like, well, if you're going to go with the CLSC, what size of box do you want for that? Okay, well, you think you need 1 medium? So she would go back to the group with the box, say, okay, we need at least 1 medium box. So now what can we figure out? And so, I was just like, wow, like, isn't this great? It's not only do you have inside of the groups collaborating, but you actually have groups collaborating with each other and having messengers kind of going back and forth between the groups to make sure that they're kind of developing at the same pace or in proportion to each other, I guess. That was really cool.
I mean, that is such an interesting story of kind of speaks about, I guess, how rich a project-based learning project can be when students are at that moment adjusting on the fly and working with the different choices and contingencies, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Another question I have, the grant which helped support this community service learning project came from the I Belong project, which was focused on ideas of how service can contribute to belonging to the community. Do you have any insight into how students might have seen themselves as active citizens when they're providing that service?
Yeah, I mean, they can see that their actions can make a difference. I think the time that really surprised them all, myself included, was when we received emails from people we'd never contacted, like people I didn't even know who had heard about us from one of the companies that had one of the boxes we'd provided, and said, "Hi, I've heard that you're providing boxes. Can I get one?" And, I said to the students, I said, "Does anybody know this company?" And no, none of them did. I didn't. And so they were just able to see. And we had probably 4 or 5 requests within a period of 2 to 3 weeks of additional people looking to take part in our program. And so students were see like, wow, like, okay, the people are contacting us, like they're starting to know, who we are and like our school and our project. Like, isn't that really cool? And so for them, it's like, okay, so like we're providing the service to the community, and we can see that has an impact, and also that it wasn't taking very long for the boxes to fill up. So that means that our project is useful, that people are using it. And again, we've had many requests for additional boxes. And so it's like, well, what can we do for these people now that our budget's been used up and our project is underway, but these people still need more support. What can we do? And so it seems like, oh, well, we can refer them to the actual company. They wanted to make a fundraiser even to raise more money so we could buy more boxes to provide to more companies. And so they could see themselves as having an impact really on the community. And I think that ties into belonging too, right? That is just what their role is in the community and what they can do for it.
Wonderful, thanks. One of my last questions is around what advice you'd give to teachers that are interested in introducing a community service learning project in their classroom.
I'll say I wanted to for years have a project like this, something meaningful for kids to work on all these like real life skills and all that. And I had to let go some of my own expectations in the sense that it's not going to be perfect. It'll never be perfect. That there are things I look back and I'm like, well, I maybe could have graded something from this and I didn't. And I'll say I did, like there were definitely curriculum connections and we worked on a lot of skills, but I didn't pull a mark from it because not everybody did a writing project. I let some kids do the oral part. I think of some preparation, of course, looking back, it's my first time teaching some of these skills in this context. So of course there's revisions I would make there. But really just, I'd say almost don't worry so much about it. The kids are doing some deep learning, even if you can't put a number on it, a percentage on it. They're making these connections and they are learning those real life skills of project managing. What does that mean? We had to, make a pivot, so to speak, in which company we were using. And so we had to rehash a lot of our work. And it took time. Like this does not happen overnight. Really, we spent a significant amount of time working on this project, but they're still giving ideas. They're still coming up with solutions to problems. And isn't that what we're aiming for anyway for our students? I tried not to control too much. I was very lucky, in fact, that I had a CLC coordinator she made initial contact to the companies for us just to give them an overview, a well-explained overview of what the project was, saying that there will be an email coming from the students to further explain the project. But she was able to make a lot of those connections. So I would definitely say to other teachers, if you have resources in your community, use them. And parents, other teachers who work in the city, if you don't live in the city where you're teaching, use those resources to make contact. And I was really adamant about, I did everything with the kids. I didn't do too much on my own. I handled the day-to-day communications and making sure the emails got sent. I read over their works, of course, before sending it out just to make sure it was clear. But in that, I took a lot of decisions with the students. Well, we had this email, this person wrote this message. What do you think? What should we respond? What would be an appropriate solution for this? And not to be afraid to designate students and give them that leadership role, where I've got students say, hey, Miss Stephanie, like, I think, what are we going to do now that we're over? So I think we need to do some kind of final email as a thank you. She's like, yeah, I'll take care of that. Perfect. Great. Go for it. And students really respond well to that, and, trust them that they're going to go somewhere, and it's going to be slow and not always the way you thought it was going to be, and sometimes awkward and at times, but I mean, we get through it. And in the end, the students really have ownership over the project.
Wonderful. That's some great advice and some great stories for teachers that might want to take on something like this in their own classroom. That's about it. I guess, do you have any final words or anything else that I should be asking about?
I think that's pretty much covers it. I mean, I think it's been a really fun project that the students have taken away from it. I've taken a fair amount away from it, even if they don't realize it right now. And I think in some of the cases, that's what's happening, where they don't realize that not every class gets to do a project like this, and that even those skills that we worked on, I had one student, oh, it's so frustrating, like we have to start over again. I said, yeah, but like that's what happens in real life. Like that's what happens when you have projects. Sometimes you do have to adjust. That these skills, even if they're not appreciating them now, that it's contributing to their development to do it in school when there is a structure with their classmates. And I think they'll be even better prepared in the future to take on further projects like this. So I would highly recommend that people do it.
Great. I guess I do have one last question.
Sure.
A big part of service learning is around reflection. Have students had a chance to think about the impact they've made on the community or things that they've learned?
Yeah, I mean, so we've done a couple of reflections on belonging. Now, belonging, it's a very big topic question, I guess, for grades 5, 6 students, but we have broken it down. So we have done a couple of the I Belong projects. And so we've talked about belonging. What does that mean? Feeling at home in your community and feeling you have a safe place, and contributing and helping others were the key things that have come up because of that. But we've had a few interesting opportunities too to interview with our local newspaper as well as CBC Radio about our project. And so before these big events, we have a class discussion to think, well, what would we talk about? What might these people ask us? And what do you think about these kinds of things? How has this changed how you interact with people in your community? And what do you think of our project in general? So they have had those reflections. And of course, for them, it's fun to be noticed. They associate it with, getting likes on their YouTube videos and things like that. But it's them putting it into their own understanding of it, right? I can't force that understanding upon them. They're putting it into their own words, their own ideas. So I think that it's been a good learning experience. And I think they have done the reflections on it. Again, some more than others. But for sure, they've had an opportunity to really think about, okay, like what was the point of all this? Why did we do it? And I haven't had that question so much. So let's say as some other projects. So they've seen the purpose of it, and that's been great too.
This is a loaded question, but do you think you'll do a community service learning project again?
Absolutely. I'm like I said, I've wanted to do one for quite a while, or something similar. And this is a really good way to kind of dip my toes into it. It actually worked out well that it was a COVID year where I wasn't so worried about ministry exams and all of that. So now that I've had that first experience, like, okay, I have a bit better of an idea of what to expect, because I'm not too much of a forward thinker and planning it so much ahead of time of what could possibly go wrong. I just like to jump in and figure it out as I go. So now that I've jumped in, and I can kind of step back next time to, okay, this is what I think I would do as a better setup next time. But I definitely would like to do one again.
Great. No, I think that's great advice. And even in my own teaching experience, there's something about teachers themselves learning by doing, so that the first years can be difficult as we learn, but as you spoke about, the benefits seem really, really wonderful. Stephanie, I want to just thank you for taking the time to speak. Congratulations on leading a meaningful project with your students and all the great publicity you've gotten in your community. And that's it. Have a really wonderful day.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.